Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
I'm Danielle.
And today we're going to be talking about our top 5 filler games. Now, you probably heard a new voice on the show tonight. Not the first time she's been on, but unfortunately Adam called in sick just a few hours ago. So Danielle, my wife Danielle, jumped in and agreed to join us kind of last minute here. She was also a guest on our show that we did last year, our partner's top 5 games. So she has been on the show once before. So welcome back, Danielle, and thanks for being a pinch hitter for us tonight.
You're welcome. And I promise I didn't poison Adam just to get a spot on the show. It wasn't me. I live too far away. It wasn't. There's no evidence tracing me back to any poisoning, I promise.
And I feel like we always get the nicest comments when Sarah and Danielle are on the show. So I feel like we're going to get a listening bump right now. So,
which for sure. I mean, people are sick of hearing from us. So any kind of like change in voice is good here. All right. So we're going to jump right into the topic of filler games. And I want to start before we get into our top 5. And that is just really a definition of what a filler game is. You know, what does a filler game mean to you? And how do you, the only rules I put around this when I put this topic out to our group here was to say it had to be a game that was less than 45 minutes in length. But I have my own other rules going around it. But what do you guys think? What does a filler game mean to you?
So I think 45 minutes, that's actually a really good place to start. So anything between 30 to 45 minutes or shorter than that, even honestly, I think 30 to 45 was kind of like the outside of the envelope there. Yeah. I think that's a great place to start. I also look for games that feel light, because you can have a game that's, kind of crunchy and you have to really understand some stuff and learn, digest some rules to get into it. And I didn't want to have that. So it's got to be a game that's got a pretty light rule set. And number 3, it has to be a game that has a pretty quick and easy setup, because nobody wants to have to set up a long game, or nobody wants to have to set up, a short game that has a long setup, because that just doesn't make any sense. And I can think of a couple that I might have made my list if it hadn't been for the fact that they also take a little bit of time to set up. I'm also super happy we're doing this topic tonight, because when we did our top of all time, I caught a little bit of flack for not including games that are lighter. And it's some criticism that I've taken to heart. I mean, I definitely can get the point of, include everything that you think is great, even if it's not a big cornerstone kind of game. So this will give me a chance to talk about some really cool games that I think are really enjoyable and have a lot going for them, but aren't going to be the cornerstone of a game night. So this should be some fun.
So I found out I was doing this fabulous guest starring when I was at the ballpark watching the Dodgers game. So I may not have a precise list of what I think a filler game is, but I'll tell you my first instinct is my filler games are the perfect games, because 45 minutes sounds amazing to me. Non-crunchy, I like that term, Chris. Non-crunchy, light. That's not filler to me. That's like a perfect game, and that's how all games should be played. Not heavy rules, light setup. I have a few exceptions to that rule, but yeah, filler games equal the best board games. How about that?
Well, okay, so we actually did a couple topics in the past that could potentially have some overlap here, but I wanted to differentiate. So we did a couple years back, Chris and I did an episode on our top 5 gateway games, and that's kind of, games that would help people get into the hobby. So those can be lighter games. And then we also did a top 5 small footprint games, which are not necessarily light games, but they tend to be games that are, smaller on the table. They don't take up a lot of space. They can travel easy and stuff like that. And those could also be filler games. But, I wanted to differentiate that I'm not just talking about light games necessarily. To me, a filler game is, it does that. It fills space, right? So it's like, it can be, hey, game night started, somebody just texted and they're running 15 minutes late. What are we going to do? We're not going to sit here and make small talk for 15 minutes until we start our game night. Instead, we're going to bust out a little game that we know will kind of be wrapped up in 15 minutes. Or maybe it doesn't matter if it's not wrapped up, because it's so light and breezy that even if we stop in the middle of it, nobody's going to care. It doesn't matter. Like, that's a filler game to me. Danielle and I are about to go to dinner and we got 15, 20 minutes. What are we going to do for the next 20 minutes before we have to leave? We don't want to be early to our reservation. I mean, we're going to be on time. We're Midwesterners, but we don't want to be early. So we'll bust out a filler game that will just fill that space. And then at the end of a night, this is oftentimes where we'll pull it out. It's like 12:15. Everyone's like, okay, it's getting late, but we're not ready. We're all excited. We're not ready to go home yet. But someone's like, I got to be out the door by 1. Okay, what can we get in that's under 45 minutes that we can knock that out? That fills the space. That's a filler game to me. So the weight wasn't as important as really just kind of the length and how quickly you could get it in. But weight tends to go along with that pretty well. So, yeah.
I have another real. I just realized another definition for filler games is games that Tim brings out when I'm not in the mood to play a game. He just tries to sneak it in there. It'll be really light and easy. It'll be fun, Danielle. And it'll be 45 minutes. So there's another way to define filler games in my world.
I wish Rachel was here to have this conversation with us because she would so sympathize with that.
Nice.
She would totally sympathize with that. And actually, the comment you made, Danielle, makes me think another thing maybe worth mentioning is maybe filler is actually the wrong word for this, because for some people, Danielle, case in point, maybe it's not a filler. Maybe this is what you want to be playing. Maybe there's a game that's kind of short and light, and maybe your ideal game night is you play 2 or 3 games of a shorter, lighter game that you find really fun. So, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe filler is not the right term.
Listen, no, it is the right term because that's literally the topic that I gave you guys tonight. You might have some overlap. You might think of these as other things, but tonight we are talking about filler games, and they might fill other roles for you as well.
Oh, okay.
So
Tim is having none of that nonsense tonight. He is having none of that deviation.
Chris and I cannot ever seem to get, when we do these special episodes, we can never get on the same page with what we're actually talking about half the time. But I think a lot of the time people finish our lists and they're like, those were 2 different episodes.
But in reality, that's a huge part of our charm. So people don't mind that, I'm sure.
I'm on Chris's side. No one asked, but I'm going to, weigh in here. Filler's really reductive, actually. I think those are I think we need a new term. So I can officially sign up for this protest. I'm on board. Yeah.
All right. I like this. I like having guest stars. Just kidding. I think it's a great topic, Tim, and I think you described it perfectly.
Well, let's jump into our top 5 then.
All right. Well, so the first one I'm going to put out there is, interestingly, a game that I was introduced to by a non-gamer. And I've talked about this a couple times recently. It's Ticket to Ride San Francisco, which was designed by Alan R. Moon and is published by, Days of Wonder. And I was introduced to this game by my brother-in-law, Paul, at camp in Maine last year. And then we played it again this year. And it's a game that I instantly fell in love with. It has fun decisions. It has a light rule set. It takes about 5 minutes to set up. It meets all those criteria that I was talking about earlier. And it's just so much fun. It packs a ton of theme into a small game. It's a short one. Now, what's interesting is when I was looking at the time, at least the times posted on BGG for these various games, I was a little bit taken aback at this one. Because can you guess what they said the time is for a game of Ticket to Ride San Francisco?
Did they say 45 to an hour?
No. They said 10 to 15 minutes.
Oh, perfection.
No way.
Amazing. I love it.
There is no way. I mean, we blasted through, I think in the course of maybe an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, we blasted through 2 games of this. And there's no way that you could ever make it through a game of this in 10 to 15 minutes.
I think you should try. You should try next time. That's a good goal to have.
Listeners, when you're gaming with Chris, this is how games go. They always exceed the listed playtime by at least 75%.
Although I'm pretty sure that even the most, non-analysis paralysis gamers out there listening right now would not make it through a 10 to 15 minute game of Ticket to Ride San Francisco. But enough about the time. I mean, mostly this game, it's about the fun. I mean, there's all the things that you love about Ticket to Ride, you get to do in this game too. Maybe not all of them, but a big chunk of them. You get a lot of those same feels. Like I said, the theme of this one, it's so adorable. I like the city-specific versions of the Ticket to Ride games because they add so much neat little details. Like, here, one of the little tokens you collect for set collection, it's a little bread bowl, with chowder in it. San Francisco, come on. You've got all these fun little things that you think about if you think about the city. I used to go to San Francisco for work all the time. So, that to me brings so much charm. And they've got a bunch of these different variations for different cities. So, depending on no matter what your city is, there's probably one that you're going to be familiar with. And between that, the theme, the light rule set, the quick setup time, and just the straight up fun, this is a great game if you need a filler.
As long as as long as San Francisco or New York are the cities that you're familiar with, then there's going to be a Ticket to Ride city game for you.
There's others. I think let me see. There's
there's other countries. There's other countries.
Okay, maybe countries. Locations, I should say. I shouldn't have said
those
cities.
Yeah, those two cities are the kind of the smaller versions of the other ones are, usually more normal ticket to ride size games with just some variation in the mechanisms, basically.
Okay, because I think the Nordic one, and then there's a couple of different ones, but maybe those are the city ones. So disregard everything I said about cities. It's New York or San Francisco.
But yeah,
Man.
I'm looking at the Board Game Geek page for this right now, and it says 10 to 15 minutes on it. Now I haven't played this game, but that was shorter than I expected, and certainly fits within that filler time space for sure.
So my number 5 game is Pass the Pigs. I actually have it here. What the story behind this game is, we had a German foreign exchange student come stay with us for 6 months, and she knew we liked board games, so she brought this game with her. So it's in German, so the rules are in German. But if you played Pass the Pigs, it's like 2 little pig figurines, and you roll them like dice, and how the little piglets land is scoring. So if they land on its nose, it's a certain amount of points, and then up on its back, all that kind of stuff. What's fun about the game is that there's one way the pigs land where you wipe out all your points. So it's kind of push your luck type of thing. So you roll it, and each time you might get 1 point, but then it lands in a kind of a unique way or rare way, and then you get like 15 points maybe. I'm trying to remember exactly. And then you can stop, but if you don't stop, then you risk, there's a certain way it lands. I've totally forgotten, but it'll wipe out all the points. So I just have these fond memories of this foreign exchange student who lived with us and really got into board games with us. Of course, she really had no choice in the matter, but she did throw herself in. And then the other piece of it, she was fluent in English, but it doesn't require language. So that was kind of nice, I think, as far as her first couple weeks and maybe month in America. She was really good, but I think, it's always just kind of you're hesitant with a new language. So it's kind of the memories, but it's super light. Kids love to play it. There's like 0 setup. If you spend more than 10 seconds setting up, you've made some serious mistakes. So it's kind of fun. And if anybody on the video, you could see it is super portable. It is the tiniest little game. So that works on multiple levels. So that's why I chose Pass the Pigs, sitting at the Arizona Diamondbacks Chase Field watching the Dodgers. That's how I chose it.
Yeah, well, you can hear that one of us is the rules teacher here and enforces the scoring and everything. But Daniel, you actually did a great job explaining that. Basically, these pigs, on one side of each of the pigs is a dot, and on the other side it's blank. So when you're rolling the pigs, you can keep rolling until one side the 2 pigs land on their sides, and one of them is dot side up, and in which case you lose all the score you've gotten up to that point at that turn. And so that's why you might want to stop earlier, because you don't want to lose all your points. There's one other condition that can happen, though, and that is if the 2 pigs end up touching each other after the roll, you don't just wipe out your points for that round, but you wipe out your points for the entire game. So there can be these rare moments, because these little rubber pigs just kind of bounce around all over the table. So there can be these rare moments where one person's just had a great streak. They're sitting at like 220 points. The game ends at 300. Everyone else is at 50 points, and all of a sudden somebody accidentally rolls them and they touch each other and they crash. Now, interesting thing about this game, when I was a kid growing up, I remember being at some like adult parties, there was kids there, but my family had parties with other adult friends, and they were playing this game so this was like, 40 years ago, and it always sounded fun. They were always having a good time with it. And then in my 20s, I was at an actual adult party for young adults, and that's weird terminology, I guess.
Keep going. Let's see where this lands. Let's see where this goes.
But this got busted out at a party, and everyone had a great time with it, because it is just like push your luck, laughter. This is a fun game, and it's a great example of a filler game too. Because even if you are just sitting there playing it for 15 minutes and nobody's gotten to 300 points, you can always just stop and okay, guys, we got to go. It's time for dinner. But that's okay. Let's just see who won at this point. Yay. It's a great filler game. Good choice, Daniel.
So question, Tim. I'm looking at the pictures here on Board Game Geek, and the first one that they show, classy folks that we gamers are, it's the 2 pigs arranged so they look like they're having sex. And so I'm wondering if you've ever played a game of this where someone did not arrange the pigs so they look like they're having sex.
I think that's the first time the word sex has been used on the Board Game Hot Takes podcast show. So thanks for that, Danielle, for bringing that to the show. I mean,
first of all, the most innocent of cute little games that you guys, the one who brought it right into the gutter. 5 minutes into this episode here. I don't know what I signed up for.
That was not us. That was Board Game Geek. That was
Chris,
the Board Game users.
I think we've only played this with kids in the room.
Yeah,
with family
exactly.
in the room. So I don't think that's ever come up. But maybe in that party when I was in my 20s.
I was gonna say, what about that young adult party of yours, Tim?
don't remember.
All right. All right. And by the way, it was very interesting to see also on the BGG page for this. It's from 1977. So sure enough, that is a classic game.
And I think good luck finding it. So we had a Christmas party for my side of the family, and my aunt came out and we played it with her. And then she got so excited by Pass the Pigs that she tried to buy it and couldn't find it anywhere. So yeah.
By the way, this is sitting at a 5.5 rating on Board Game Geek, and it just goes to show how snobby Board Game Geek users are about traditional.
What does 5.5 mean?
It's out of 10. It's not.
I was gonna say it's out of 5. Look at that. It's out of 5 for me. How about that?
This really is a fun game. I enjoy playing it every time we do. It's a silly, just throw some dice and push your luck. So
and obscene, I guess. Silly and obscene.
No, yes, it is now.
It is now.
Can't play this with our kid in the room anymore.
Yeah, jeez.
All right. Well, first of all, this was a surprisingly interesting list for me to put together because, of course, my mind first went to the handful of games that we play pretty regularly as fillers. But I was like, I don't want to just talk about games that I've played before. So I started to go through all of the kind of family weight games on Board Game Geek and started running across all these other great filler games that have come up at different points over the years as I've been at other, game nights with people and stuff like that. So I ended up with a list of about 25 games that could have made this list. There's a lot of great filler games on there. I'm going to start with number 5. This is a game called Kingdomino, and this is it's got a fantasy theme on it, but it's actually designed by one of my favorite designers, is Bruno Cathala. And I think Bruno Cathala does a great job of designing interesting and very fun games that are very family weight. And this is probably the lightest of his games that I would typically talk about. But I think it's great. It's really simple. You've got, at the start of every round, let's say you're playing 4 players. You've got 4 tiles up on the board, and they're kind of a domino, I guess you could say, because they all have 2 sides to them. But instead of being numbers, the 2 sides are going to be 2 different kind of landscapes. So it's going to be like swamp and forest, or sea and plains, or whatever, prairie. But ultimately the goal is that you've got I want to say it's a 5x5 grid that you're trying to build within. And so you take one of these tiles, you've got your castle right in the middle, and you're going to put this tile adjacent to your castle on the first one. But from there on, you can put it adjacent to any other tile that's in your grouping. And ultimately you're trying to make the biggest sets, the biggest groups of tiles that also have crown symbols in them. So some of the tiles you'll draft will have crown symbols. And the way the drafting works is that the first person to go in a turn picks a tile, and they can pick any of the 4, but the lower number that they pick, meaning like it's kind of the weaker tile. So like if I picked a 2, it's going to be weaker than an 8, and there's like 55 numbers in there. So that means that I'm going to go first next time, but I just got a weaker tile, generally a weaker tile. So you're making an interesting choice to say, do I want a better choice next turn, or do I want to get the best choice this turn? Very simple choices. This is it's not a complicated game at all. This is a great game for families, but I really like playing. It takes about 15 minutes to knock through a game. It's a fun little, just, kind of Tetris puzzle with simple rectangles in it. And, always fun for me. Again, very light, great to fill 15 minutes of time.
Is this a particularly rare game, Tim? Because I looked it up on BGG and did not see it there.
No, it's one word. It's Kingdomino with one word. So there's no space on it. It's not a rare game at all. I'd heard about it for years, and in fact, there was a sequel to it called Queendomino, which I think is what they call a standalone expansion, and it's supposed to be a slightly heavier version, and you can add the 2 together if you want to. But we actually were. It was a couple years ago. We were in California for a family vacation, and we found a little game store, and our daughter was with us. So I was hoping to pick something up we could play in the hotel room with her that night when we got back to the hotel. And this is the game I picked. So we played it. As always, Gabrielle was completely bored with any type of board game, but Danielle and I had a fun time with it. So it's stuck around in my collection. I bust it out when I can, especially with newer gamers. But again, a great little filler as well.
I had to look it up. Like I have, you know how some people have, I was trying to think of the term, but like how people have face blindness, like they can't, I have no memory of the name of any game. I've played this game multiple times. I
Yeah.
started to picture something, I look it up, I'm like, nope, I had no idea what this game was. I can't remember, it doesn't store. I'm missing a DNA, there's a gene I don't have that stores board game names. Good luck to you, Tim. That's the burden you have to bear.
Well, and sure enough, once I looked it up with no space between King and Domino, sure enough, found it looks like a super charming game.
Yeah.
So that gets us up to the number 4 spot in the top 5 list of filler games. And I'm going to give you probably the heaviest game in my top 5 list this week. It's Imhotep, designed by Phil Walker Harding and published by Cosmos Games. This one, right up at the edge of the time limit. It shows about 40 minutes on BGG, and that feels probably a little bit light. So this is one that might go actually a little bit longer than that. But it does meet my other criteria of being a pretty quick game to play, quick game to set up, and a pretty light rule set. And Imhotep, you're a builder in ancient Egypt. Each player has its own colored blocks. And these are big building blocks of the type that were used to build the pyramids and other various monuments. And so each turn, you get to either load up a block onto a barge, sail a barge, or take a card that gives you some kind of a benefit. And so with each of these barges, you can place the block wherever you want, and where you place it on the barge is going to determine the order in which it's taken off the barge. And then the places that you can sail them to, there are a number of puzzles. And this is a game that features a really neat little thing that I find that I enjoy a great deal in games, and that's games with little mini puzzles, similar to Marrakesh, which Tim introduced Adam and I to at our most recent con. This one, when you sail the barge, you drop off the stones, you take them off the ship in order, and then you place them based on where that puzzle. It tells you how you place those stones, and each one has a slightly different scoring mechanism. So there's an obelisk where every stone that of your color goes into an obelisk, and the player with the highest obelisk at the end of the game scores a certain number of points. Second scores a certain number of points. There's another puzzle where the most stones that are touching, and they're laid out in one flat row, or one flat tableau, but they go in a certain order, and you have to sequence them so that the stones of your color touch each other. So each one of those is a little mini game that you're trying to figure out. Then at the end of the game, you add all these up, and you have a winner. And I love those kind of little mini games, and you pack that in with an easy to set up game and one with a pretty light rule set, very easy to understand. And this game is a total winner in my book.
I've played it. I had to look it up, but I was going to ask Tim, because that's usually how this goes. I'll say, Tim, did I play that game? And then he tells me if I did or not. But I looked it up. I saw the board game box. I had no idea. But then there was other pictures of the gameplay, and I remember the little boats. It's been a minute, but I have played that game. I have no memory about it other than that, so I have no comments, but I have played the game for the official record. There you go.
Yeah, it's been a long time, Danielle, since you played it with me, I think. This is a great end of the night game. This is like a great, hey, we just finished something heavy. No one's ready to go home quite yet, but it's coming within an hour. And then to get this on the table, it's like Chris said, quick to set up and quick to get into. So that's a good pick, Chris.
My number 4, that's the count we're at, is the Mind game. So I will try to get through this rule explanation without Tim having to add anything to it. He probably still will. So this game he showed me told me, and I go, that sounds stupid. And he said it was a party game. I'm like, no, everyone's going to hate this game. It's boring. And you just stare at each other until somebody blinks, and it's boring. But guess what? Everybody we've taught this game has bought it, I'm pretty sure. And so the game goes, let's see, there's 100 cards, and you may have a couple people. Let's say there's 3 people playing. So everyone gets 1 card. And there's a number on 1 through 100. You know what your number is, but nobody else knows what you have, and you don't know what anybody else has. So you're trying to stack them up in sequence with the lowest number going to the highest number. So it becomes kind of a weird stare down game. So let's say, usually, just to give a spoiler alert, how people tend to do it is if you've got a low number, you're kind of itchy and go aggressive and try to get your card out. And you may have body language. Maybe that may be illegal in the game, but we do body language that indicates I'm like, and then if you've got number 99, you just kind of sit back in your chair and you kind of wait. So it sounds so dumb. I don't know. It sounds dumb when you say it. And then there's something so fun about trying to figure out, it becomes kind of reading people, actually. I think you become, and playing with kids is so hard because they don't kind of follow the rules of body language, and they get too excited, and they just can't kind of get that, hey, if you've got 75, maybe you wait a little bit. And there's mechanisms, and Tim can add his like little flavors of the rule because I'm missing a bunch, because there's mechanisms to reveal your hand or whatever. But I think Tim and I have played it, and well, now I have to ask you, what's the highest one? Is it like you get 13 cards or 10 cards in your hand at some point?
Yeah, it's based on player count, and I think it was in a 2-player game it goes up to 13, but I can't remember.
I think we made it, didn't we?
We did one time,
and it was like we were sweating and tired and exhausted. It was just like this silly. But imagine 10 cards in your hand, and like the variety of numbers, and then you're staring at this other people, one other person or multiple people, trying to figure out what's in their head. So I don't know. You guys got to play it, but it's a fun game. It doesn't take that long to play, especially if you play with like kids. You go through it pretty fast.
Well, that's the cool thing about it being a filler, is that it can literally end in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I think Danielle said, but in the first hand, everybody starts with 1 card. And then if you beat that hand, then everyone gets 2 cards in the next one. And you have like 4 lives or 3 lives to start. What that means is that if anyone goes out of order, you lose a life. And if 2 people slam down their cards at the same time and they were both out of order, then you lose 2 lives. So you can lose in the first hand, although you usually won't. You might lose in the second hand. You almost certainly lose in the third hand the first time you play it. But what's interesting is that this game has like a memory for the players. So like once you play a couple times, you start to recognize, without intentionally doing it, but you start to, all of a sudden there's an amount of time that you wait based on, oh wait, that's 10 numbers away. So I can wait 2.5 seconds, right? And your mind just starts to do that for you. And so it does weirdly become where it feels almost like you're psychic, where you start to get in the right rhythm and everyone's playing cards at the right time. But it's fun. And what's great about it as a filler game is that you can knock out a game in 5 minutes, maybe 10 max. And then if you still have 5 more minutes to kill, you just start another one. But then, you're not going to go much longer than that. So it really fills that hole really well.
That's a great choice, Danielle. And like you guys, the same thing for us, where we've had this game, we've introduced it to multiple people, and I think everybody gets it. It's a great, fun game. Nobody ever kind of gets it at first. They kind of have that same reaction of, well, this is going to be dumb. But then once they try it, they actually enjoy it a lot. And funny thing is, my son actually introduced us to a non-card game version of this game, or at least it reminds me of it a little bit. So we spend a lot of time hiking, and so he wants to play little word games and stuff when we're on the trail. And this is one we bust out a lot, which is you're counting to 10, and each person has to count to do the next number. But if 2 people talk at the same time, then you have to start all over again. So, you've got 1, and then 2 people say 2 at the same time, then you got to start over again. But if you can kind of keep it from doing that, I know it's not the exact same thing, but it's the same idea, and you don't need any equipment at all to play that game.
Yeah. And I just want to actually go on the record at this point and say that I don't think I've ever taught a game in my life that anytime a board game is played in our house, Tim teaches it. So that's why my rules memory is light, and because I don't have to teach them. So that's just, so it's like officially under my bio, never taught a game in her life. How about we go with that?
You did great. You did
Yep.
great. With the rules description.
You got it. You got it.
All right, well, my number 4 is a game that's just about as simple and takes just about as long. This is called Fantasy Realms, and this is one of my favorite fillers because it's a silly little game, and Chris is rolling his eyes. Danielle hates this game too. She doesn't remember it, but she hates it. But this is a silly little game. It's got a generic fantasy theme on it. But the idea is that everybody's dealt 7 cards at the beginning of the turn. And one of the reasons I like this as a filler game is it plays up to 7 people really well. But you can play it down to 3. I think there's even a 2-player mode. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But let's say we're playing 3 players. Everyone starts with 7 cards, and all these cards have a number on them. That's ultimately what their final score is. But then they usually have some conditions in the text box of it. So it might be, for example, you get plus 20 points for every army that's with this card, and all the cards have like suits written on them. We'll call them suits, but it might be like it's a type of card. So it might be a land, it might be a army, it might be royalty, it might be a source, it might be magic, whatever, right? There's types that are written on them. So a card might say plus 20 points for every army, but voided if there's a beast. And so basically what happens, you've got these 7 cards and you're trying to look at them and say, what of these cards are going to, if I put them together, are going to score the most, but I want to get rid of some cards, and I'm hoping to find a couple cards that fill in the gaps here. And the game is really simple. All you do is you draw a card off the top of the deck and then discard a card from your hand. It can even be the same one that you drew. Or once you discard it, it goes into a kind of a tableau that anyone can draw from. So if you're the second player or third player, you can, instead of drawing off the top of the deck, you can pick one of the cards that have been put out. And then again, you draw one and then you discard one. So all you're trying to do is find, either by random chance from what you draw off the deck or something that somebody laid out, is find little combos that go together in your hand. And you play until there's 10 discards out on the table. So it can literally be as quick as 10 full turns, which means that it's basically like 3 times around the table if you're playing 3 players or 4 players. So you might only get 3 or 4 draws in this game, maybe 5 draws if you get a longer game that's going. But it runs really quickly, and you're just trying to get rid of the junk that's kind of going to make your cards negative and find a couple fun ones. And then you score it up. It takes 10 minutes, and then you can run with these huge scores from like 100 points to like 300 points, get crazy combos that go together. It's just silly. It fills a gap of time, and I always have fun playing with it.
I have so many thoughts and feelings about this game. And you're right, I did not remember at all. But I looked it up, and my thoughts and feelings are around the images of the cards. So anybody, this is my public service announcement for the day. Tim used to play Magic the Gathering. Many of your listeners may know Magic the Gathering, but it's a card game with lots of, every card is unique and they have lots of different powers, and you can pile cards up as far as grouping powers together. I can't even explain it. So anytime you play a game that centers on cards with Tim, that has powers and putting them together, you will lose. You will just always lose. So that's my first statement there of why, because I always lose every time. I know the pattern now. Every time there's a game like this, I don't know if it's like that, but that's what it looks like online. I see pictures of dragons and swords, and I see lots of descriptions on these cards with a little iconography, and that's just up Tim's alley, and you will be destroyed in multiple ways if you try to play this game against him. Just my advice to everybody.
Well, I completely agree that this is a game that not on my list, not on my fun list. And now I have one more reason not to play it. So at least with Tim.
I'm here to help. I'm here to help everybody.
Daniel, it's funny because Chris actually hates this game too. And it was one of the first kind of filler games that when we started playing together remote on Tabletop Simulator, I owned a copy, but we didn't even get a chance to play together before the pandemic. So it was one of our first game nights where we had played a game, and then I think we had a few minutes while somebody had to step away, and we were trying to fill some space, and we played it, and Chris hated it, and he's been talking about how much he hates it for years. And there's now, it's been rebranded. It's such a wonderful game that it's now gotten different IPs put on it, but there's a Marvel version of it. We played it in Sedona, in Big Bear when we were there recently. So Chris, I mean, you won that pretty handily. You still didn't enjoy it though? I think we talked about this.
That was the least fun I ever had winning a game. Now I will give a positive spin on this one, that if you like that core mechanism, which I don't, I mean, that's the bottom line of it. I just don't love that core mechanism. So there are people that do. Obviously, this is a very well loved game. It's a big hit. You love it. If you like that mechanism but don't love it and want something that includes that but isn't all of that, I think there is actually a nice, I'll say, reinterpretation of this by Stonemaier Games in Red Rising, where they added in some additional play mechanisms like a ship track and collecting, I forget what they were called, the little
rubies
gems,
or something like
the
that,
rubies. Yeah. But there were other things you were doing in addition to getting the cards. Plus, if you're the if you're someone who enjoys that IP, then that'll be a hit for you as well. So I think there is a slightly more fun way to do that, and that's maybe Red Rising as opposed to just the straight Fantasy Realms or Marvel Fantasy Realms or whatever. So that gets us to number 3 on the top 5 list. And I've got a minor cheat here in that I've got one and then sort of a second tier one just that I'm going to add, but I haven't played it a bunch of times, so I can't say too much about it. This is Can't Stop by Sid Saxon and published originally by Parker Brothers Games. I'm not sure who publishes it most recently, but this game has been around for a long time. It's actually first published in 1980. So here it is. We've talked about a game from 1977 and a game from 1980. And it is so much fun. It's one of the few games in the past couple of years I just played once and it's like instantly I have to have this. I want to have this to play with my family. And it's so simple. You're just rolling dice and you're going to combine those dice to move up these tracks. And there's a track from 2 to 12. And you continue to move up those tracks until you reach the top of that track. And once you reach, I think it's 2, the top of 2, or is it 3? I can't remember if it's 2 or 3
it's
tracks.
Three tracks. Sounds again. Yeah.
Once you're at the first person to reach the top of 3 tracks is the winner of the game. And the trick of it is that every time you can only put out, I think it's 2 markers each round. So you have to keep rolling the same numbers or the same dice that can add up to those same 2 numbers every time you roll the dice. So it's a huge push your luck. And push your luck is always a good time. It's always fun. It's always exciting. And this is kind of the purest version of push your luck that you can have. And it's an absolute blast to play. Now, my slight cheat here is a game called Mountain Goats, designed by Stefan Risthaus and published by BoardGameTables.com. Recently got introduced to this one by our listener and friend of the show, Melba Morris, who had us play a game of this on BGA. And I had never even heard of this one. Another old timer. This is a 2010 game. But with this game, you roll the dice and you combine them to move up these tracks. But instead of getting to the top and you win, you get to the top and then you can continue to use that particular number. So you have a goat that moves up to the top of the track, and that's when you get the points. Then every time you move up, once you're at the top, you get points for that. But another goat can come up to the top of that track and knock you off. So you got to be careful about where you go and hope that somebody else is not just knocking you off. So you don't just take the quickest, easiest one because you're going to get bumped. So similar concept, some slightly different mechanisms, super fun. Those are both great push your luck games, and I just love them to death.
I played this at Tim's family's house, so I'm sure he's probably talked about it, but Tim comes from a board gaming family, and I think that's the first time I played it. I don't come from a board gaming family, so I'm sure it was at his house. I think we've played it multiple times, but it is certainly a lot of fun. I agree. It's kind of a fun little bit of stress, right? Because the push your luck introduces a little bit of stress, and a little bit of personalities come out too on who's more of a risk taker. I mean, it's a small risk, but if I think about it, I think his dad is probably more risky on things. Like if I think about how the play goes, and I tend to not be, but then I get bored and I just want to kind of push things around. But yeah, it's kind of a fun. You see each other's personalities, and it's a fun, low stress, minimal stress, but a little bit of excitement.
Yeah, this is a game that I grew up playing a lot, and it was a game that I kind of, once I get into this hobby, 2015, 2016, I was like, oh, there's so many better games, and I just kind of, this is just an old family game. Nobody needs to play this. And then rediscovered it a few years back, and I love it. I think it's wonderful. I think as a filler, it's a fantastic game. Now, Chris, Mel did not invite me to Mountain Goats, so I have not played that game, but now I want to try it. It sounds fun. It sounds like a fun, kind of similar style of game.
Oh.
And thanks, Mel, for excluding me from that. I don't know what I did to you, but it's all fine.
Outed Mel now.
Maybe she thought it was too simple for you.
Maybe.
You're too much of an elitist. So my number 3, that's what we're on, right? 3 is Azul. And every time I say that, I think of Zool for Ghostbusters every time. So maybe that's the draw to it. I don't know. I would think people know this game. I can't really explain it. but it is tiles, these beautifully 5 or 6 different patterns on a of tiles, and you're putting them on a board in a certain pattern. That's about as much as you're going to get on the rules from me. But what I like about it, this is another one. I don't know, I keep going back to this, but another one we taught our German exchange student, and she really liked it and really wanted to bring some games home. And her mother doesn't speak English. And those of you who play Azul know there's absolutely no language. There's no cards to read. There's no words at all. It is really just these patterns that you're trying to make and putting them on a board and trying to race other players to pick the tile colors you want. And you can see what everyone else is doing. But I think what I like about the game is there's enough complexity and enough variety. It keeps it interesting. We played it pretty heavy for a while. We were kind of on an Azul run. And if I remember right, isn't Adam really into Azul or was into Azul? Isn't there some weird thing?
You didn't need to give a rules description because I think Adam's talked about this game every week for the last 4 years.
I love it. It's perfect because anyone who's listening is be like, I don't even understand that game, but it's just, it's really beautiful. It's kind of fun visually. It's also really different. Like, no offense, but we'll just pick on Fantasy Realms because we like to pick on that. But there's so many games with that similar medieval, fantastical wizards and warlords or whatever you guys call it. And so it's fun. It's fun.
Whatever you guys call those people in the funny clothes.
Yes, whatever. The Renaissance fair of board games. That's what it feels like a lot of the times. Like meant the Renaissance fair on a board game. But so just, anytime I get a theme that's outside of that, outside of European and Renaissance fair, it's kind of exciting. So it's just kind of fresh and fun and easily accessible to many people and light. Yeah, it's a fast play. Am I right on that? Yeah, it's pretty fast.
It's pretty good. Yeah, like 30 minutes typically you'll knock this out.
And tactically fun.
Yeah.
Like it is too. Like there's a couple games we play where you have to reach in a bag and pull out stuff. Quacks, right, is another one where you're pulling out. Oh, you're not reaching in a bag on that one.
Your own bag, you are. Yeah, it's just a different. This one you pull out of the main bag. And
you pull out of the main bag.
Floors.
I'm just having a board game senior moment, I guess. I don't know.
But it reminds me that we should actually play this, Danielle. Yeah. I think this would be a really fun one for us to get on the table. 2 players. I think it's actually fun 2 players because you can really mess with other people, which is never mind. We probably shouldn't play 2 players because you can't mess with other people.
I've been married to you a while. I know you totally are going to mess with me. I'm like over it at this point. I get it. I'm okay.
All I can say is that this game is pretty doggone close to board game perfection. I mean, it's hard to say anything else about this one. It's such a great game.
Chris, would this have made it your list if you weren't just looking for variety? Because I'm like I want to say 95% sure that even if I told Adam you can't name a game you talked about recently, he would still add as well to his list. So that Daniel's like the fill-in for Adam on this one, but
it probably would.
Have made your list? Yeah, that's
I probably would have. I did try to. Now I think all the games that I put on my list are all completely legitimately belong on that list, but I probably would have had Azul in there if it wasn't one that we talked about so often. So yeah, it's a great choice.
Yeah, I'm here for that. I'm here to bring Azul back all the time, every time.
Yeah, and also I love the Ghostbusters reference because I also think that
every time it's like Azul, like the fridge. Excellent. You can picture the fridge, and there you go.
All right, my number 3 game is a game called Coloretto. The playtime listed on this is about 30 minutes, and it typically takes about that because it's a game where each hand, takes maybe like 8 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, but you play a few hands until you're done with the game. It's a really simple game. You've got, I think it's 3 stacks, maybe 3 or 4 stacks are going to be set up, and all you're doing is you're taking a random card off the top of a deck and putting it into a pile. Or you're picking up a pile, and the pile has to have either 2 or 3 cards in it. And so they're all just chameleons, but they have different colors on them. And what you're trying to do is build sets, but with the condition that when you pick up a set of cards, you have to pick up all of them that are in that set. And you then put them into your own little, like sets of cards on your tableau, but you only score for, you lose points for the lower sets that you have. So I think you only score 3 of the sets that you collect, and then you lose points for all the sets beyond that. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be fun. It really doesn't. Every time I've been taught this game a couple times, a couple years apart, and I remember having fun with it. And then I got taught the rules again recently, and I was like, oh man, what this game cannot be fun, but somehow it is. Somehow it's just just enough of the tension of there's a stack there, and I want to pick that up because it's got 2 cards that I'm trying to go for, but I'm stuck with this other card. And you can really mess with the opponents, because when you're placing a card, you're going to choose which stack will throw off their plans or which stack will help you, but hopefully no one else picks it up before it gets around to you. So surprisingly fun for very, quick play time, very simple choices, surprisingly fun, and always have fun playing this one. It's a good filler, just fills in a little gap of time.
And what did you say was the time on this one, Tim? Like what roughly to play a game?
On Board Game Geek, it says 30 minutes, and that feels about right. And, this plays like 3 to 5 players pretty easily, I think. So it's it always goes about that amount of time. It's very quick.
Okay.
We learned this game in Colorado.
Yep,
called
right.
Coloretto.
Coloretto.
Yeah,
we played Coloretto in Colorado.
Yes, we should have a shout out. So John and Courtney are friends who lived in Colorado at the time, moved back to LA, and now moved to Michigan. They were a big part of kind of board game rejuvenation for Tim, I think. Courtney was, at least. And anyway, they taught us this game. They were living in Colorado at the time when we learned Colorado.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a cute looking one too. I like the little chameleons on there. They're pretty adorable. All right. So I think we're kind of rounding third and heading for home here with to throw in a little baseball, a baseball analogy to my hardcore baseball fans here.
You didn't need to do that.
Yeah. Tim's, I don't know if you mentioned it, but he came from a ball game tonight. So, I know he's got, right, baseball in his head.
And Daniel's our pinch hitter.
The pinch hitter, yes.
I hope I used that right.
I think you did. I think you did. Just to add, some color commentary here. Tim texted yesterday and said he was going to an MLB game, and I said, I can tell you're not a huge baseball fan because you said I'm going to an MLB game instead of I'm going to you name the team game.
I literally could not remember the name of our local team, like the Phoenix. The
Arizona Diamondbacks.
Right, except I could not name it at all. So I knew that we were going to a game, but I had no idea.
He doesn't know. I had to tell him how many balls before they walk. I don't know. That seems like nice. Just tonight I had to, and I'm not a sports person either.
Hey,
so.
You know how I refresh your memory every time we play a board game together? You just refreshed my memory of some of the rules that I had forgotten.
We're here for each other,
similar,
clearly, in all the meaningful ways.
I love that supportive relationship that you guys have.
Exactly.
Oh
man,
that brings us to number 2. Disregarding my previous baseball analogy. And this is a new one for me and one that I just talked about last week. It's 7 Wonders Duel. And it's a game that I have gotten so addicted to so fast. I just talked about it, so I won't say a whole lot about it, but there's these tableaus of cards that are laid out. And for each one, you pick a card, you either pay the cost of the card and you get to play it, put it in your city. You get to turn in the card and get coins if you don't have any coins to buy cards or you just don't want the card for your city. Or you get to use that card to build a wonder if you have all the right resources that you need to buy that wonder, to build that wonder. And so there's several rows of cards. The first one is flipped over so you can see it. The next one's flipped down. The next one's flipped over. The next one's flipped down. So basically, you don't know what you're going to be unlocking when you unlock a couple of new cards. Once they're uncovered, then you flip them over, and then you get to see what those cards are. And you just take turns back and forth, you and your opponent, picking those cards. And this is a 2-player only game, so just 2 people picking from that group. And your goal there is to keep building, different cards are going to give you different numbers of points. Keep building the right number of buildings, the right number of cards to get the most points. And then you win. And it's super simple, but there's something about the decision-making in this that is so incredibly satisfying that I absolutely love playing this game. I've had it in constant rotation, probably multiple games at a time, ever since I tried it for the first time a couple of weeks ago. And I've had so much fun with it. As with every game that I've played against Andy Schwartz, another friend of the show, I won a game or two, and then I felt like I ran into a brick wall, and I haven't won a single game since. So thanks for nothing, Andy. But still a great game. Just don't play it with Andy Schwartz.
You're muted, Daniel.
Noted. I've written it down. I'll avoid Andy at all costs. I love this game too. I do. I was so excited. But I'm confused. I played. There's a Seven Wonders that we play with. We just played with our game group. Seven Wonders,
that's
something else.
Seven Wonders. It's just called Seven Wonders, and that one plays 3 to 7 players, but does not play 2 players. So Seven Wonders Duel is the 2-player version.
I think I have the Duel on my iPad, and I fly a lot for work on super boring flights, and I play this. And I play Everdell on my iPad in hopes to beat my husband someday, which will never come, clearly, because I'm like I beat him 2 times out of 100. But anyway, the Seven Wonders Duel, I play him. I love that game too. I love it the same reasons. It's quick kind of a gameplay, but there's 7 or 8 things you're choosing from, of which you're gonna focus on, and it's a little bit of variety, a little bit of and I think because of that, then the gameplay doesn't get dull, doesn't get redundant, because the next time you can go after, the game is too tight to go after all 7 or 8 or whatever options. So you kind of focus, and then the next time you can focus on something else. And yeah, I agree. It's a super fun. I love this one. I love both. I love the Seven Wonders. There's this other Seven Wonders you wouldn't call filler.
It's on the long end. Like, so regular Seven Wonders has a playtime of about 45 minutes. So it's a nice, it's a fairly quick game, maybe an end of night game, but not typically kind of falls into that filler territory. Seven Wonders Duel certainly on the shorter side. In fact, Adam, the last couple of weeks, as we've talked about, he said, Tim, you played half a game with me. And the reason for that, it was a filler game. We were waiting for Chris and Steve to get up one morning. It's like an early morning at one of our little cons. And I was like, Adam, we're up, we're making some coffee. Why don't we go ahead and play this out? But unfortunately, about 10 minutes into it, then Chris and Steve got up and we said, okay, let's wrap it up. But that's exactly the spot for it. It fills a great little niche there.
Yeah. And Danielle, the point you made about the different tracks you can sort of go down, the strategies, there's only a few of them, and they're pretty obvious once you're going down one. Like, one is the military track. It's very obvious if you're going down the military track. And so that's one of the things that I enjoy most about this game, is the fact that you have to sort of telegraph your intentions. And so you have the option of blocking the other player, but you're usually going to do so at your own detriment, because you're not going to be doing something that's more exciting for your own strategy. And it doesn't take a lot of deep, thought and a lot of deep strategizing to be able to see those things and react to them, which is one of the things that makes this game so fun and so light, is that it is so easy to read those strategies and work with them or against them.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, this is the second game on our list tonight that Bruno Catala was one of the designers. He was the co-designer with Antoine Bauza on it. And again, reminder that he's a brilliant kind of family, lightweight game designer. And I think we're going to hear one more tonight. But yeah, he's one of my favorite designers, and this is a great reason why.
So I can barely name the name of the games. There's no way I'm going to get the designers. So maybe I'm going to name one. I don't know. Anyway, I can. People have to look up the designers and the publishers on their own. That'll be their little homework every time I talk about a game. I have no idea. But my number 2, right? That's where we are, is Sea Salt and Paper, which is a card game. And we play it. Actually, I would say a lot of the games I've chosen are very portable. How about that? They're like, you can shove them in your purse. You could shove Pass the Pigs, The Mind, and Sea Salt and Paper in your purse, sneak it into wherever you want to, and you can bust out board games at any moment, or take them on a hike or whatever. Anyway, why do I like Sea Salt and Paper? I don't know. It's hard to describe. I think I've talked about, I don't know if I've been on the show once. I don't remember if I talked about it before. I'm certain you guys have talked about it. Sea Salt and Paper, you just put in combination. I can't explain the rules, but it's really cute artwork. It's got sea themes and fish themes, and you're putting cards together, and there's 5 or 6 options, and they do different things, and you're trying to get into certain points. I don't know. That sounds really boring, but I don't know why. I just love it. It's so much fun. I think it's one of the few games our daughter will play, actually. And I think also it had a special meaning to us because Tim may have told us A Pack of Lies, I have no idea, but he told us when we got it, it was not available in the United States. So we had this like super secret advanced copy. So it felt very special. And he is not precious about anything, but if that game ever left, he'd be like, make sure that game comes back because you can't buy it in the United States. And I'm like, oh, wow. He doesn't get that way about anything. So maybe that's why it's this super secret advanced special copy. But sea salt and paper with that terrible description, people are going to have to look it up, I guess. But it's fun. Trust me.
I have talked about it a lot. In
Okay,
fact, it's the only
perfect.
reason it didn't make my list tonight, because it's a great filler game. Again, one of these games where one hand takes about 3 minutes, and so it's one where you score it up. And I don't. But this is a great game to say like, hey, we got 15 minutes before someone comes. Let's play some sea salt and paper. And even the kind of the heavier game friends that I'll play with, this will be a game that oftentimes, because everybody loves it, will end the night like, we got 30 minutes. Should we try this game? Should we try this game? Oh, sea salt and paper sitting right there. Let's bust it out. This game is also designed by Bruno Catala. This was the other game that I knew was going to show up on a list here. And again, in Teo Rivera. And it is available in the United States now. So if you haven't already heard us talk about it a lot, Pandasaurus publishes this in the United States now, so you can get a copy of it. There's a great little expansion for it I might have mentioned on the show called Extra Salt, and it just adds a little more variety. So once you've played it a lot, I don't know, it like Danielle said, it's simple. It's like draw 2 cards and keep one and then discard the other one. That's basically what your actions are. But I always love finding those little combos. It's kind of like I will say like a slightly more refined Fantasy Realms, where it's like you're trying to put those little things together without all the text you have to read and all of that stuff. It's kind of, that I think that's a good comparison.
I was going to say that too, because I feel like, that's kind of ironic that, this was on your list, Danielle, and yet Fantasy Realms was on your anti-list. But I get that. I mean, there's something about this game that I find charming, and, just slight tweaks in rule sets, and even production or theme can make a big difference in a game. I don't love this game. I mean, this is not one but I do enjoy this one more than Fantasy Realms. And it's something about maybe this slightly simpler version of how the combos work together, or how there's like the thing where you get to like pick up a deck or something. I forget what the rules all were, but yeah, it's a charming game too. It's got that really cool artwork with the origami sea themed stuff. So yeah, neat game to look at.
And there's only if we're gonna like really take Fantasy Realms like down the road, we might as well. It's just there's only 5 or so options. There's not many cards to know. So kids pick it up really fast, which is kind of like me. I'm like a kid in this. And then with my patience level, Fantasy Realms is just like any of those. There's so many different things to know. Like you're going to memorize the cards like the first time you play a full game of it. You're just going to know it. It's not going to be that hard. So I think it's so much simpler than Fantasy Realms. But I don't know. They're just, you can push it for the points. Like it's a push your luck, right? There's a little bit of a push your luck because you can call the game when you get to 7 points. But you can say, hey, I can't even remember the term. I played it.
Stop or last chance.
Last chance. So if you do last chance, your opponents get another turn. And if they beat you, they could still beat you if they get a higher score than you. So it's a little bit, but if you can also race and try to get there first, and it's unlikely they can beat you. So there's a little bit of push your luck with it too. So it keeps it exciting.
Yeah, this is the game that we have probably played the most together over the last 2 years, I would say. And we have played it. We played it in Costa Rica. We played it Mexico. Like basically this is the game that will go in every luggage now. And we're in a hotel room. We're sitting by the beach at a table by the beach or whatever. This gets played. So yeah, it's a great one. Awesome. All right, my number 2 is a 2-player only game also, and there was a whole bunch that I could have included, but I didn't want to go too heavy on the 2-player only games. But this is called Onitama, and this is a very interesting little 2-player head-to-head kind of a chess battle. So I'm not big on abstract games, but I really found this one fun. I only got a chance to play it a couple times. Fills that filler space of about 15 minutes. We got 3 people coming tonight. 1 person's running late. This is a great game to pull out. Great little production. Comes in a small box with little rollout mat and these little wooden pieces. And basically you have, I think it's 5 pieces on each side. One is like your, king, and then the other 4 pawns. So it's 2 simple pieces. But the way it works is everybody has 3 cards dealt to them at the beginning of the game. And the 3 cards dictate what movement type of action you can do. So one of them might say move a piece 3 spaces forward, or one of them will say move a piece 1 space forward and 1 space to the left. And so you get to pick one of those 3 spaces. Everybody knows what are in front of you, and they're different than what's in front of your opponent. But when you play it, you take that action, but you're giving that card now for that's what the card that your opponent's going to pick up after they play their next card. So you know that not only what you can play, but also what your opponent will now have an option to play on a future turn. It's very simple. Again, it's been a little while since I played it, but I know one of the win conditions is to knock out the other person's king. And then there might be another win condition, like getting all your pieces to a side or something like that. Really simple, plays in about 15 minutes, and fun. Just that little mix of, I've got 3 cards. I can see what they can do on their turn. And if I play this card that might be beneficial for me, it's setting them up for something else. So you got to think a little bit about how you do that. I have a lot of fun with this. One of the few abstracts, like true abstract games, especially kind of a chess-like game, that I found, pretty interesting, and is a great filler for 2 people.
Interesting commentary from someone who once argued with me that chess was actually a highly thematic game. But putting that aside for the moment, this actually looks pretty clever. I mean, it's very chess-like, but I like the idea of having the actions dictated by the cards as opposed to some inherent capability of the piece. So that sounds kind of clever. All right. And with that, I think we are now sliding into home. And that brings us to the number one filler game. And this is one where I think, if I was being completely honest, and we were doing our best games of all time or favorite games of all time, this might actually be my number one game if I was not excluding games for lightness. And I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before. And so folks who have listened to us might actually be able to guess what game this is. It is Star Realms, which was designed by Rob Doherty and Darwin Castle. It is published by Wise Wizard Games. It's such a history with this. It's one of the first games that Tim ever taught me. I went out and bought a copy of it pretty quickly, but before I did that, I got the app. He suggested getting the app, and then after getting the app, I learned that you could play with people that you knew, and you could play online, and just started doing that incessantly. So at this point now, I have and probably for the last, I don't know, what is it, 5-6 years we've been gaming together now. I mean, I have at least 15 to 20 games going at a given time. My play count is somewhere in the 11,000 games or something like that. And it never gets old for me. So for those who haven't played this game before, and I do highly recommend the app, it's a terrific app, but regardless of how you're playing it, it's a deck building game. It is straight deck building, space themed. There are 4 different factions that you can use. You play each time you draw a hand of 5 cards. You play those 5 cards out. You do with those cards, whatever powers those cards have, whether it's giving you money, giving you attack points, or giving you health points. You play those out, and you use your purchasing points to buy new cards and bring them into your deck. And you keep reshuffling those cards, hopefully also getting rid of some of your older crappy cards and playing stronger hands every time until one of the players has knocked down the other player by 50 strength points. And that player is the winner. And it's that simple in theory. I mean, it is a light overhead in terms of rules, but once you start factoring in all the different abilities of all the different cards, there are a million different things that you can do. And that's one of the beauties of this game, is that there are expansions, till the end of time. And so they can keep expanding this game. And I think they've done so quite successfully, that every expansion seems to add something new and interesting, and you can combine them in any way. It's super fun. This is probably a sad thing to say, but I don't think I mentioned this before, but once my son said, "Dad, you really seem to know these cards pretty well." And I said, "Yep, you pull out a card, tell me the name of the card, and I will tell you exactly what that card is able to do." And he pulled out a card, and I'm like, "Yep. So that one costs this many points to buy. It does this much damage, and it allows you to do this other thing." And he did 3 cards like that. And he was like, "Wow, you need a new hobby, Dad, because you're spending way too much time learning Star Realms cards."
It's like flashcards. It's like you memorize all the flashcards.
So my comment on this game is that Rachel and I are Star Realms widows. I think that's what's going on. I think that because I know exactly when he's playing it, because he always holds his phone north, south, or vertically, except when he's playing Star Realms and he holds it horizontally. And I know exactly when Star Realms is on his mind and he's focused and he's playing it, which is quite frequent. So 11,000 games, I'm sure, I don't know if Tim's up there. I wouldn't doubt it. I see it on his phone a lot, and I bet he could do the same thing with the cards.
I only play with Chris, and I generally only play with
only
Chris.
8,000?
And I'm only one. If he's got 10 games going at a time, I'm only one of them. So that means I must play about a tenth. Chris, how many games do we have now? Like 1,500?
It's something I'd have to look it up to see for sure, but it's thousands. I mean, it is thousands of games. And just so you know you're not alone, Danielle. Just this week, Rachel and I had a big fight because she said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "Hold on a second." She said, "You're playing Star Realms."
Yeah, I don't believe it. I believe it.
Sorry, Rachel.
Yeah.
I deserve to get yelled at.
Danielle and I do actually have a fun history with this, in that we were sitting in India. We were there for a wedding like 5 years ago. We went out to visit the Taj Mahal. It was a hot day. We were out there, kind of seeing the sights for several hours, sitting in a tuk-tuk, following cows down the street, and had this experience. But by the end, we were just exhausted. We were thirsty. And so we paused in this little hotel before we got in the car back to Delhi, the region we were staying in. And we're sitting in the hotel lobby, and we just weren't ready to go yet. We're like, it's air conditioned in here. It's nice. And we just sat there and played Star Realms together, nice. Pass and play on our phone or whatever for the time. But that trip, I remember that's when I introduced Danielle to it, and her and I played it a decent amount when we were in our hotel rooms and stuff. But anyway, we played Star Realms basically at the Taj Mahal. So that's my international story with Star Realms.
It is a fun game, though. I agree, Chris. It's a good pick. I haven't played it because I'm kind of blocked out of it. Tim plays so much of it with you. I can't wedge myself in.
Here's the deal. Here's the deal with it. There is an element of, some of the game becomes, it's almost like how Magic the Gathering used to be, where the game becomes, some choices are just instinctual now. Like it's not even a choice anymore. And I think that does create, although the game has enough randomness where you could introduce it to somebody and still have a chance of them winning, but the odds are lower. And so I haven't been pulling this out with Danielle because, I know it's frustrating to just lose consistently. And I just think it's almost an unfair advantage at this point, not because I want it to be, but just because I played too much of it. So although I love the game, and Danielle, like I said, we played it a decent amount in the past. In fact, this was a game that we used to like, okay, our baby's sleeping, we can go play this on the bed and not make any noise, and just kind of bust this out. It's so easy to get played anywhere that we would play it frequently. But I do feel like at this point she'd just be, pissed off because I
crushed me
because it's just
every
too
time.
easy. It's too easy at this point. So, although I think Chris, you're about to break through finally, right? Like I've had a winning record against you for 5 years, and I think you're pretty close. How far off are you now?
Oh, you're probably like 20 games away from my overtaking it. But here's the thing: you're right to say that it really is something that anybody can win. In fact, I remember reading on the official Star Realms blog at one point, the best players in the world have about a 60% win rate. So, there is enough. And my son, who I don't know if he's a savant or just lucky or whatever, but he crushes me almost every time we play. He's a 12-year-old. So, I mean, it's, I don't know. But I'd say go for it, Danielle. Take him down. Take him down. He's ripe for the taking.
Oh, my gosh. I don't know if I can handle it. Speaking of handling it, my number one game, I was sitting here thinking of how to describe it because I'm trying to describe these games a little, at least with some description. So my number one game is Fantastic Factories. And I was thinking about how to describe it. So you pull out cards and you build a city of 10 cards. And those cards in your city are kind of like buildings or whatever, but they have little special powers and you're trying to build points and whatever. And there's some pieces on the board you can, you need to buy those cards. You need like electricity or lightning bolts and crates or the metal, iron, metal. Steel. Anyway, so some of the buildings give you resources and some give you points, and then you can do all this stuff. And I was thinking about, and you draw the cards at each turn from, resource of cards everyone has access to. And I was thinking about it, and I was realizing, as I mentioned before, there's another game where you take cards and you build a city. And that game I lose all the time at, and that game is Everdell. And then someone introduced me, the only one, Tim, introduced me to Fantastic Factories, and I don't lose this game all the time. And I'm realizing maybe that's why I like it. That could be the reason why I like it. It's also a little bit less complex, I would say. And there's just, it's a little bit faster. But I think the other reason I like it is that you don't have to wait for other people to play. You're kind of taking your turn simultaneously, basically. You roll, when you're choosing the cards, the center cards, the community cards, I guess, you have to wait for one person to choose. So you might have to wait then. But I get so impatient. And so you're taking the turns together. So there's no waiting time. I get kind of bored, and I might not be a good gamer with Chris, because Tim does we talked about the top of the episode about how you take some time to take your turns. In this game, you couldn't. It wouldn't matter. Like, maybe I'd have to wait. But anyway, I think that's part of it. And I just realized right now, this big Gestalt moment I've had, that maybe the underlying core of why I like Fantastic Factories is it's my replacement for Everdell. As much as I want to win Everdell, I never do. Like, I get so close. And it just crushed every time. And I literally kind of get mad sometimes. And it's like, I kind of like flip over the table and walk away. I don't actually do that, but I do the equivalent of it. And I'm like, I hate this game. I'm leaving. You pick it up, and then go. So.
No, it's funny. So Fantastic Factories, and Danielle has a great win rate on it. I mean, it's competitive, but the interesting thing about it is, even though there's a lot of different strategies you can go down, somehow we always end up within a couple points of each other. So it's never a blowout. Everybody's always within like 19 to 23 points or something like that. And I wouldn't have thought of this as a filler game, but it does fit within that like under 45-minute range. I think the Board Game Geek says it's a 30-minute game, and that's probably pretty realistic. That's usually about how long we play it. So it totally fits within that category. The game is, I like playing it with, Danielle likes it, and it's great because it gives me something to think about. It every time your little city develops differently, so there's a lot of variety in there. It's not interactive at all. Like, you don't care at all what anyone else does, and so from that perspective, it doesn't make a great like social event, but it's a great thing for me and Danielle to fill 30 minutes while we have some time. So we play this a lot, and I'm so glad that Danielle likes it, and I'm glad that she wins at it a lot. I love it when other people win and it makes them happy. So this is a good.
You can still talk to each other. We're social enough. Like, you still talk to each other.
Well, you can socialize, but you don't interact within the constraints of the board game itself. Almost not at all. Like, you can't make a decision that has any impact on what I do. And so it's not like you can't have a social moment, but you aren't actually, like you're not interacting with the other players.
You can't really block people, or you can't do anything that interferes with what they're trying to build.
Almost nothing you do matters to me, and almost nothing I do matters to you. So it's perfectly fine of like, hey, here's a few minutes, we're going to do our own thing, and then we'll get back together and talk about what we just did, and then move into the next round. So it's a great 30-minute filler for us, for sure.
Yeah, Tim has mentioned this one. I have not played it, but it looks like a super charming, fun game. And it also has to win some kind of award for the best subtitle of any game that I've seen. The actual title of the game is Fantastic Factories Build, Train, Manufacture. Now, that subtitle, I mean, does that not add to the game playing experience?
No, it doesn't.
That was a well-chosen subtitle.
Oh my gosh.
Nicely done, Joseph Z. Chen and Justin Faulkner.
Yeah, somebody needs to pull them aside and have a conversation.
I like to call Joseph out because he every time we've ever mentioned this, he does actually listen to the episode and then gives me a commentary on it. But he actually did the artwork as well as designing the game, and I think it's charming, and I think it's a smart little design. So I think kudos to Joseph K. Chen, regardless of his subtitling. I think he's done a great job.
I agree. I like the artwork a lot, and there's no dragons or wizards in it, so I'm kind of a fan.
Yeah. Or it's like corporate America, yes.
Peasants, maybe that could be. I lean into that a little bit, but there's no wizards or sheep or wizards or farmers.
Daniel wants to play a little Smartphone Inc. at some point. We're gonna have to bust that one out. She has still not played it.
I believe you.
All right, my number one game is a game. This is a perfect filler. It's called Strike, and this game just fills 10-15 minutes. It's silly fun. This is what it is. It's essentially a bowl. You literally have a plastic bowl that comes in the thing, and it's dice. And everybody starts with, I don't even remember, 6 dice or something like that. Maybe it's 4 dice. So the first person plays, they roll all their dice in the bowl. If they get any ones, which I think are X's in the actual dice in the game, these are 6-sided dice, right? So if they get a 1, you lose the dice. They're gone from the game. They're removed. So this dice pool is going down. If you get any pairs, then you keep the dice. They come to you and you own them. And you can roll until you, I think, don't get any pairs or something like that. Or you can stop. You can choose to stop, because you could literally, like, lose all your dice. And then the next person rolls and they throw all their dice in the bowl, and they are trying to match up with the dice that you've got, right? So, but of course there's no strategy here. You're just rolling dice and hoping that you also get pairs, because then you get to take the dice. Anyway, it's just as simple as that. You go around, you roll dice in the bowl. If you get ones, you lose them. If you ever run out of dice completely, you're knocked out of the game. And so you just play this game until you're the only person left. And with 4 people, 5 people, it can take like 5-10 minutes to play. It's silly. I have a friend who throws a little local con. I think this was the second year do it, the first time I was there. And he literally set up like a dog gate in the backyard, and then put like a blanket in it. So it made this big bowl, and then you got these big, huge foam dice. And we were chucking foam dice in the back, playing Strike with it. This game it's just goofy. Again, no strategy at all, but it fills 10-15 minutes, and everybody's laughing and just having a good time, hoping that they get to, that they get to be the last one standing.
Is this bunko for men? Is this bunko for men? That's what it sounds like.
For men.
Well, because bunko is like kind
this
of
is a gender neutral. This is a gender neutral game, Danielle, as is bunko, I would assume. But
technically gender neutral, but I think if you looked at who played it, it's largely women play bunko, and then men are like, I'm not going to play it, so you can play Strike, right?
We don't judge.
You don't
not at all. We will, all of us here will play bunko, and I think you would be more than welcome to our Strike table as well. In fact, every time I played it, there have also been women playing as well. So it's not a men's only game, but it is a very fun filler game, and I think fills that spot perfectly. It
does look like some really fun push your luck. I mean, push your luck with dice. I mean, that is always a good time. That sounds like fun.
Farkle, bunko, Yahtzee. Yep, there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, or like left, right, center, I guess, is a similar type of game. All right, great. So filler games. Those of you listening finally know what Chris's favorite kind of lighter games are, at least the filler points of those. So thanks, Chris, for bringing that to the conversation tonight. Daniel, thanks for joining us and talking about your favorite filler games as well. And
Adam, the antidote is on its way. You'll be healed shortly.
All right, so we'll wrap up the episode, except I do have a couple quick reviews to read tonight. So as always, we like to give a shout out to our listeners who leave a review for us on Apple Podcasts. The first review was left by Aspenty in the United States on Apple Podcasts. This was a 5-star review. They said, the best board game podcast. And the review said, I love the rapport these guys have, and I like that they offer diverse, honest opinions on games. If I'm considering buying a particular game, I always check to see what these guys thought about it first. So not only are they enjoying the show, but they actually respect our opinions, which is shocking. That's nice to hear. And the second review that we got this week was 5-star review by Warren C. And they said, great show, highly recommend it. I found this show a little more than a year ago on a road trip from York, Pennsylvania to Savannah, Georgia. The format was quick, entertaining, and honest, with a bit of trash talk every once in a while, so I was quickly drawn to it. I went back to listen to every episode, and it was so interesting to hear the show evolve. It was also interesting to hear about the games they wanted to play, the shelves of opportunity, and or the Kickstarters on back order that I knew were covered in a future episode. I bounced around a lot, but I listened to the final episode this morning, and it just happened to be the 1-year anniversary show. And by the way, if you haven't heard this one yet, this is literally was 1 year after we started this, so almost 3 years ago, because we just hit our 4-year anniversary without a lot of fanfare. And everybody that was involved in the show at the time, which was 5 of us, all kind of talked about our board game origins and stuff like that. So I think it's a fun one to revisit if you haven't heard that one. Anyway, they continue on. I felt like I already knew the personalities, but on this particular show, they talked about how the show got started, what got them into board gaming, and what they did for work, to name a few. A big shout out to the guys for the time and effort that I'm sure goes into the show each week. Now that I'm all caught up, the only remaining question is, when will they be switching it to 2 episodes a week? I think this would be a divorce conversation if that happens. So maybe not going to happen. Thanks for helping to make long road trips seem so short. Keep up the good work. And this was from Warren. So thank you so much, Warren. So glad you enjoyed, and thanks for sticking around with us and listening to all of those episodes. I always have to say thank you to people who went back and listened to those early episodes that were so rough, and we were just figuring out our craft at the point. But it's fun. So glad that you had a good time with it. Thank you to everybody who listens, and really appreciate these reviews. So if you do listen to us, please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, feel free to join us on social media. We have a Blue Sky account that I'm very active on. So if you want to kind of see what games I'm playing regularly, and Chris and Adam chime in there occasionally as well, find us on Blue Sky. And we also have a really active Facebook group with over 600 members that are always posting about games, asking questions, having a conversation. And most episodes, we do have a poll at the beginning that we have our listeners chime in on kind of their board gaming hobby. So that's a great place to respond to it. And if you really enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/boardgamehottakes. That helps cover the cost of the show and is allowing us to kind of put some money back into it, but also some really awesome benefits for the supporters as well. So check us out there. I think that will wrap us up. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.